Without a shadow of a doubt, it's the Cronkite Show in social media history. I got my man, Donovan Sadiq in the building. I got my girl, Demetria K. Say, I got a monster sitting up at the top, Mr. Robert Williams. We waiting on Wayne Dolecifino to come in, but we ain't gonna wait. We gonna get it in, man, tonight. Bail reform, compassionate releases. Y'all know what it is, man. It's the war zone. Let's get to it. Say, I want to welcome y'all into the war zone, man, and we're waiting for Wayne to show up. You know, Wayne is busy, man, so he'll pop in a minute. He'll pop in a minute. If he doesn't, that's cool. I mean, we gonna rock and roll with what we got. So I wanna say what's up to my co-host Donovan and Dimitri. And it's been an eventful day for us. We've
Yeah.
going to school and looking at the research and all that. But tonight it's not about that. It's about something that's very near and dear to a lot of us, especially the African American community. Um, Bail reform, compassionate releases is something that's a major hot topic throughout the country. A lot of people feel like we don't need bail reform. A lot of them realistically don't understand bail reform and compassionate releases.
Right.
But at the end of the day, hopefully we give you some clarity tonight. So I'm gonna turn it over to my co-host Demetri K, and she gonna get us going.
Well, so hello everybody, and especially Mr. Williams. How are you?
I'm doing great, Demetria. Good to see you.
Oh, good. So I'm one of those people. I'm on the side of bail reform. I think it's long past due. We in California, Donovan and I are in California, so California is one of the first states to actually have bail reform. Which basically says that you are able to. They got rid of the cash bail system,
Right.
and it basically benefits people who are poor. And who don't have the money to bail out. And so I'm one of those people. I'm glad that it's being done and it's being done all over. And I know it's not perfect. And some other states, I think Texas is one of them. They got some sort of amendment. I'm trying to understand what it's about, so I'm sure you guys will tell me. But yeah, it's long overdue. We all know the story of Khalif Browder in New York. The young man that was jailed for 3 years. He's accused of stealing a backpack or robbing somebody is what it was. And he stayed in Rikers Island as a 16-year-old for 3 years without ever going to court or any of that. And, one day they just let him go, but he stayed there so long because he wasn't able to afford the $10,000 bail. His family wasn't. And so we know the unfortunate story of what happened to him. He ended up committing suicide due to the horrors that he experienced as a 16-year-old child in Rikers Island. And anything and everything you can think of happened to this child. So I'm for bail reform.
Me?
Take it away.
I didn't know you were up there in California.
Yes.
And my man here, where are you at right now, man?
California, Riverside.
Ah, look at you, Jerry, doing it big. Welcome to Texas. Welcome to Texas, where the Confederate flag flies free. Yeah, bail reform, compassionate release. It is a big issue. It's funny that the COVID virus has actually uncovered as many issues as it has created, right? On the justice reform side, bail reform is one of those. We know what happened during the presidential primaries. Democratic socialism was a big topic, right? And now we're seeing it spit out all over the place. Folks are able to go to college online for free. Folks are able to get tested for free. The government spitting out stimulus checks. And so this COVID thing has really uncovered issues, mostly humanitarian. Compassionate release, bail reform happen to be two of those. Before I get off into the compassionate release and bail reform, though, Listen, compassionate release and bail reform are really just a couple of the components of justice reform. And that's what I do. I'm a justice reformist, comprehensive justice reformist. Now, we used to say criminal justice reform, but we're trying to change the narrative on that, because the focus is the system, right? If the system treated everyone fairly and equally, you wouldn't have to worry about, what happens with different races, ethnicities, and so forth and so on. And so bail reform and compassionate release are just components of justice reform, which is what we're fighting for. And by the way, I am the founder of the Alliance for a New Justice System. It is an organization that is a collective group of elected officials, of justice reformists, of organizations, even media, that have come together to shine a statewide and national spotlight on the issue of justice reform in hopes that our leaders in Austin will embrace this important message leading up into the 87th legislative session. We understand that numbers mean power, right? Last session, as I would go about testifying from one committee to one committee, you know how they ask you, what's your name and who do you represent? Well, back then I would say my name is Robert Williams, and I represent the Coalition of Black Democrats on all things related to justice reform, and they would understand that there's 1,000 or so people behind me. When we walk in there in the 87th session and we say that we are the Alliance for a New Justice System, they will understand that there are hundreds of thousands behind us on this very important issue of justice reform. Compassionate release, for those who don't know what it is, hell, it's just what it sounds like, right? It's a humanitarian issue during this time of the COVID crisis. If you can just imagine your county jails, for those of you who've never been in one, they are very crowded. Folks packed in there like sardines. Not the most sanitary place in the world. And we have 70% of those who are there. First of all, you can't call them criminals because they're there because they simply can't afford bond. They haven't been convicted of anything yet, right? So they're not criminals, they're inmates. Second of all, just about another 70% are there for nonviolent or low-level drug offenses, right? And yet during this crisis, when we are practicing social distancing out here in the world, when we're wearing masks and spraying cleaner on our hand everywhere we go, don't drink no Lysol, y'all. That don't work. But doing these other things, it's not possible within the jail cells. And so the humane thing to do, the compassionate thing to do, is those who are simply there because they cannot afford their bond, those who are nonviolent offenders, let these people out. It's just as simple as that. Now, a lot of people think when we say let them out, you just let them go free. No, they got to come back for their court dates and they got to do all that stuff. But at this time, let them out, right? Decrease that crowd size, just like you're trying to do in the restaurant. You're saying you don't want them up to no more than 25% capacity here in Texas, so you'll be safe. If the object is to keep people alive, if the object is to contain this virus, this is a no-brainer, something that we must do. Now, Governor Abbott actually presented a decree, we call it GD 13, where he was for compassionate release. There were a couple of problems with the decree that he had. One was he kind of reined in the judges, and he said that no one could get released if they had a violent record behind them. We don't want violent people out there on the street either. But you must understand that every situation is different, right? My president, Coretta Brown, who was the president of the Alliance for a New Justice System, when she was in high school at 18 years old, got into a fight and threw a soda can at this white girl. Got a felony attached to her name for that. If she was in the prison system right now, under Governor Greg Abbott's order, she's one of those that wouldn't be able to be released. Let's do a coke can or something. That's not a violent criminal. And so we're asking him to release the bonds that he had on the judges. And then second of all, we had some specific ask of the governor. And we've actually sent him a letter. We've sent this letter not only to him, but all of our representatives in the Capitol. And we sent these letters to our DAs and county judges in our 6 or 7 largest counties here in the state. And the asks were very simple. Yes, we want these people released, but during this time, listen, we got to be safe about this. Ask number 1, make sure that they're tested. All right. Now, Judge Hidalgo up in Harris County, who I love dearly, I think is doing a great job. And in her release, she said that they would have a health screening. A health screening is not a test. They need to be tested. Ask number 1. Ask number 2, we're asking that you make sure you have a place to at least quarantine these people for 14 days. All of them don't have a place to go. Everybody that's looking on Facebook right now, all of the co-hosts and hosts that's on this show, we got a roof over our head. You know, we don't have to worry about, everybody's not in our situation, right? And so we don't want to just release people out in the street and then they're running around giving this stuff out to everybody else. They're very simple asks that we asked for the governor. And what ended up happening was the governor actually got sued by some judges, right? And this thing been floating around in the courts now for the last week and a half. And it's really funny, kind of complicated. I won't, go off into everything just except to tell you that where it is right now. And where it is right now is it's been decided that the governor's decree is enforceable relating to the judges, but it's non-enforceable because it's unconstitutional. And that leaves us right where we were really from the beginning. And that is having progressive DAs, right, to give directives to their judges to start releasing these people on PR bonds, as they're doing in Travis County, on $1 bonds. Get these people out of jail. Get them out of jail and get them to safety and get them to their families. Last thing to tie in before you jump in there, compassionate release is really just another name for bail reform. That's why we're catching hell trying to get folks out of jail right now, because those who have been opponents of bail reform, and I've sat at the table of the bail bondsmen of Texas, and they got a bunch of money. I've sat at the table with the police unions here in Texas, and this bail reform issue is something that they do not want. They understand that if we are successful with compassionate release right now, it increases our chances of successfully passing legislation in the 87th legislative session. Right? It's a political game. And they're playing politics with people's damn lives. And that's a shame.
Well, Rob, let me ask you a question. I'm gonna play devil's advocate because I know people will say that, and I get it. When you say that there are different circumstances for different people. Everybody has a different circumstance. But every now and then you got that one that a judge may feel compassionate for. Allow them to go out of jail. I think it happened a couple of weeks ago, and
It,
and guy go out there and he does something crazy. This is what the people who are against compassionate release bail reform look for. We don't do the statistics on the success stories of the ones that were let out and they do what they're supposed to do. But we see the statistics being thrown in our faces on the one or two cases where you got that one that's just gonna get out and he ain't gonna do right, and then he ends up caught up in something else. What is your opinion on, especially in Harris County, with the police union, with Joe Grimaldi, the president of the police union, who I think is firmly against compassionate releases and bail reform? What's your opinion about the guys, especially the bail bondsmen in Harris County as well as the police union?
At this point, I'm not particularly going to call out any names. They are against bail reform for a few reasons, and they will use the fear tactics, if you will, finding a situation where someone has been compassionately released and a day or two afterwards has gone on to commit a crime, right? And out of the hundreds that have been released, they'll find that one, Acevedo will put it on the Channel 11 News. Kim Ogg will put it on Channel 11 News. See, this is why we don't need bail reform, because this, that, and other. Hold on. And I really hate to bring up this part, but Jerry, I'm like you, man. I mean, we hold people accountable, and at some point, you got to hold your judges accountable.
No questions. I mean, if I had an issue with compassionate release, I think that some people don't deserve bonds. So if Grimaldi or if the chief has a problem with compassionate releases, I would ask them, why did Gerald Goins even get a bond in the first place for killing two innocent white people when we got people in there that's in there on some BS and you won't let them out?
You're exactly right. You're exactly right. And and this is they use that to convolute the message of bail reform, right? They put that out there for the general public that really isn't involved as we are, so that when it does come up, the first thing, hey, there my boy is Wayne. What up? I'm gonna shut up, man, and let Wayne come in here, my boy. What did I do?
You in the building, man.
8 o'clock. He did nothing yet. I'm sorry, man. I just walked into my house from my office and then I saw your text and I said, "Oh, I'm in trouble."
You all right?
Yeah, you're all right. Good to see you. What are y'all talking about? Talking about compassionate release and bail reform. All right. Well, I'm a compassionate guy, so I'm going to play the bad guy tonight. Okay? Yeah. Look, can I start real quick with a preface that the criminal justice system in this country has been unfair to people who don't have money, whatever color they are. I think it's been uniquely unfair to the African American community. Okay, but having said that, I think the problem is that the public at large was sold bail reform, compassionate release, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to take the COVID stuff out of it. We were sold it to say, look, people should not be in jail just because they're poor. And people should get a second chance when they do something wrong that's minor, right? They make a mistake, okay? Beating up your girlfriend, robbing stores, hijacking people, killing people, that doesn't qualify in my view. And what's happened is that it has been used as a narrative to basically just let everybody out. There are people getting out for $30 that then go kill somebody. And it's the minority community that's going to suffer the most. But so, you know what, bro? You can't get away with that, man. You got to be specific and name that person. Who is it? Oh, somebody got out for $30 and killed somebody. You can't. Dude, that is the convolution of the message right there. No, you can't just throw that shit out there like that. But it's true. Name it. Name that individual that got out for $30 and killed somebody? I want to know.
It's on my Facebook
Thank
page.
you.
I interviewed. Hold on. No, look, don't play that with me, because I'm not here. I'm telling you why. What I can tell you is that there's a woman whose daughter was a victim of family violence. Her boyfriend beat the crap out of her. He was released on a PR bond for $30, and with 2 days, she was dead. Her mother's name is Melanie Infinger. Her name is Caitlin. It's a story that's been all over the news. Every day, we are releasing people on PR bonds that aren't minor people who made a mistake. There are people with histories of violence. You go to Andy Kahn's Facebook page, who's a big crime victims advocate, every single day there are stories like this. What I'm suggesting to you is that let's either do what we said we were going to do, but not use it to open up the gate for violent criminals to get out. I'm sorry. I don't care.
We're on the same. We're on the same page there, Wayne. We're on the same page there. But the convolution of the message I really don't like, because you can, first of all, you can name 2 or 3 of instances that happen like that, and you can name hundreds of other success cases. Number 2, what you're talking about is not really an issue with compassionate release or bail reform. It's an issue with the damn judges that released somebody that had a record, shouldn't have got out like that. Right?
Look.
Now listen, let me tell you something, man. I tell folks all the time when as I'm working on justice reform, people think that we are here to help out criminals. No, the aim of justice reform is not to reduce accountability for criminals. No, you shoot somebody, your ass need to go to jail.
Right.
The next person you shoot might be my mama. How about that? So the aim is not to reduce accountability for criminals, but it is to increase fairness, justice, and equity in a system that we know has been racially biased since Jim Crow, even before.
It's also been
the problem that you speak of is not a problem with compassionate release or bail reform. Sure, it's a problem with those who aren't doing their homework with who they release.
So we did a review of all the people that got deferred adjudication recently, right? Which is essentially behave and don't do it again, right? On everything from sexual assault of a child to aggravated robbery to hundreds of felon possessions of weapons, hundreds of people who have been convicted twice of family violence. They are being released with the approval of the current district attorney, right? And the result of it, in some cases, is a success story, right? But it's also, people are getting beat up. Most 50% of those people, 50% have either reoffended or violated their terms. Look, I'm with you on the.
Where'd you get that data? Where'd you get that data from? I'd like to see it. I have not found it.
Okay, so we did a request to the clerk's office, and we know.
So you're talking Harris County, not statewide.
I'm talking Harris County, right?
Okay, I deal statewide, but we'll deal with Harris County.
All right, and look, everything's different, but in Harris County, there are 23,000 individuals who were convicted since January 2017 and given deferred adjudication, which is, as you know, don't do it again. Behave for a certain period of time. 50% of those people have reoffended. Now, on bail reform, when you let someone out of jail, right, on a PR bond, who is a violent criminal, you are gambling. And I'm not talking about someone who makes a minor mistake. I'm talking about someone who's violent, has a history of violence, whatever color they are. And look, can I tell you something? I don't play that game, okay? It's 2020. I think people have to have responsibility to not commit those kind of crimes, okay? You let them out of jail, and there is a 45% chance that they're going to do it again or do something worse. I say, I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. Violence should not be given any compassion.
Well, first of all, I'm with you. Violent offenders.
Well, then
should not. Hold on. I got 2 points to make right quick.
Sure.
Violent offenders should not be released. And right. I mean, that's when we sent our letter to the governor addressing his decree. We agreed with him to a certain extent. We did want the judges to have the flexibility to look back on these inmates' records to see if they would actually be eligible for release or not. The convolution of that message, I really can't stand. The second thing.
Okay. Go ahead.
What's that?
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
Man, I had a brain fart. I lost my second thing. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. That's my fault. The second issue.
I'll get it in a minute.
No, but look, let's talk about that first message. This isn't convoluting. If we agree, okay, that people who commit violence are in a different category, then it's not me you have to convince. It is what I view as soft on crime judges. There is a difference between compassion and stupidity. People who have a history of violence, and I think you'll agree with me, have a pretty good chance they're going to be violent again, right? For whatever reason, right?
And well, I can tell you what that reason is, and which was my second point. It came back to me.
Yeah.
That's why we focus on comprehensive justice reform, right? Because if, for example, if we are successful in getting legislation for bail reform, the underlying issue for justice reform still remains, right? If you got bail reform, but you don't have reentry and rehabilitation, right? You're still increasing the chances for these people to recidivate and end back up in prison. And if you don't have legislation that ends the collateral consequences, banning the box where, hell, you get out, you can't get a job, you can't get an apartment, you can't get a Pell Grant, further your education, you're going to recidivize and end back up again, increasing mass incarceration as well. And so it's not just this one size fits all thing.
I agree.
We fought hard for legislation. As a matter of fact, it was a bill we pushed called HR 387, Project Rio, trying to re-implement reentry and rehabilitation across the state of Texas, right? So that these inmates, when they had 6 months left on their sentence, they would be put in contact with the Texas Workforce Commission. These people would get their paperwork together, this, that, and other, basically reacclimate them back out into society and the workforce, right? And so we can sit up here and say, well, these people over here are so bad, they shouldn't be. Well, let's do something about it. We call this restorative justice instead of perpetually punitive justice, right? We know if they don't get any help and they can't get a job and they can't find a place to stay and they can't further their education, they probably will end up back in jail.
Okay, so I don't have a number for me to how much money we spend in the prison system right now, but let me tell you something. If somebody,
I do.
Okay, but if somebody is truly repentant, okay, and again, the problem I have with the theory is that I'm not going to risk my daughter or my grandson or my beautiful wife or your family or anyone else's family taking gambles on people that are violent. I'm a responsibility guy, okay? People make choices in their life, and I don't go back to Jim Crow. The difference in my discussions of these things is I think the marijuana stuff is ridiculous, okay? I think pulling people over.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
and I think that has created a lot of our problems, right? Mm-hmm. I think that needs to change. I guess where I get in trouble is every night on the news, we are seeing the byproduct of what the politicians, sorry dogs, the politicians, it's my dog, sorry. I got 5 of them. The politicians are forcing the judges to do. They are, some of these politicians, and we talked about Rodney last week, but he's one of the classic ones. He is telling these judges, if you don't let these people out, even the violent ones, right? Let me knock on my window. Even the violent ones, then I'm going to run someone against you. If we could agree that the African American community, which elected many of the new judges, right? I think we'll agree with that, right? Politically. If that community doesn't say to those judges, look, That's not what we meant, okay? We can repair and restore and all that stuff, but we've got to stop letting out violent people for a song because we're sending the wrong message to them. We're basically
and you're sending the wrong message too, man. I mean, in like 2 seconds, you said violent about 50,000 times already, and that's the convolution of the message. Now, I don't know if I can't believe Rodney Ellis is mandating judges to release violent criminals. Please show that to me. Now, as a justice reformist, I hadn't seen that. If he is, he's wrong, and that's not something that we stand for. As I
let me ask you guys something.
Not to do that.
Let me ask you guys something.
Just look. I mean, I think we're a lot closer than look. And you keep on calling about convolution of message. It's not convolution of message. My view is different. If you make a mistake, you shouldn't be in jail because you're poor, and you should be given an opportunity to fix yourself. If you go around raping people and robbing people at gunpoint, right now there are people that get busted who are already felons in possession of a weapon. I hear Democrats and criminal justice reform people all the time talk about gun control. Okay, and I don't want to change the subject, but let's be honest. Right now we have a law that says if you're a felon, you can't have a gun, right? That's not that complicated. We are arresting hundreds of people with guns who are felons, some of them dangerous, violent felons. And you know what we're doing? We're letting them out of jail with the promise they won't do it again. So I don't.
Man, you say we're close together, but we not that close, man, because you hadn't heard me sit up talk about felons, guns, violence. And I'll tell you why. Because 70% of the people that are incarcerated now don't fit up under the classification that you're talking about. You're talking about the minority of those that are in there. First of all, 70%, man, right there in Harris County, are there for low-level drug offense or non-violent crime. 70, Wayne.
Let me say this, guys.
That's what I said. We're not that far apart. Where I think a lot of people are scared and angry is when they turn on the news and say, this was not what we were told this was going to be. Most normal people, right? And I'll put the freaks and the racists and the other nuts somewhere else, right? Most normal people are cool with people fixing their lives. What they're not cool with is the fact that it seems to be increasing crime. Now, maybe crime's increasing just cause, but it seems like every night, and you can go on Channel 13 or Channel 2 and see every single night, there seems to be a story. Some 3 guys are just arrested for
killing. You worked in the news. They sensationalized. They ain't going to go talk about the guy that went out there. Hundreds that have been released that are success stories.
Yeah, because
come on, man. And I will tell you this, where I think that we are close together. And this is why we founded the Alliance for a New Justice System. Yeah. As I worked in the Capitol lobbying on justice reform last session, one thing that came abundantly clear to me as I went from office to office to office of these representatives, and that is, man, hardly any of these people truly understand the issue of justice reform. It was like I'd have to get like kindergarten classes and all these different things. And so if our representatives feel like that, you are correct. That the general public feels like that as well. And that is one of the goals of the Alliance for a New Justice System, right? Is to put a message out there on justice reform that is palatable on both sides, that people can understand, that they understand not only the humane side, but the financial side of it,
right?
And the results of a restorative side.
Let me jump in here, guys. Let me jump in here.
Say, look, you're not going to get the media to talk about success stories, but can I tell you the mistake that's being made? And you and I could disagree on this, but you can get Judge Maria Jackson was the chief felony judge, and she'll tell you what's been going on. There are other judges that have come forward and say it too. The mistake that's been made is that what we should have done is do what we said we were going to do. Let's show that a program that lets nonviolent people out and gives them that second chance. Let's do that for a year and then use that to say, you know what, here's what's working, here's not what's working. Instead, and I can do it every day with you. Instead, because I'll share my data with you. I will. Every day, you see cases of people who are getting second and third and fourth chances to screw up, and they are. And I don't want someone in Acres Home or my neighborhood, Stella Lincoln, Braeswood, or any other neighborhoods. I don't want somebody's grandma killed because somebody who had a record of violence over years and years gets some free deal. I want them to have to put grandma's house on the market so they'll behave. If there's no
one thing you're saying I like, Wayne, and you're saying let's make it work.
Yeah.
Okay,
but
let me jump in here for a second.
We have to agree.
Let me jump in here for a second. What I need both of you
has to be to the Democratic judges. If you keep letting out violent people for a song, we will replace you. And in return, I think most of that, what I would describe as the more conservative community, whether they're white, green, blue, whatever, that they will say, okay, because people were for this bail reform. But then, you know, you take a bite of the apple and all of a sudden you want the whole fruit. That's a mistake. Because now people are saying, this wasn't what I signed up for, and you sold me a bill of goods.
Well, let me jump in here, guys. Let me jump in here. Now, I need both of y'all to forget for a second.
I don't hear you.
What is your race? Forget what your race is. Now, I'm going to go back for a second. The 13th Amendment of the United States of America says that slavery will exist in the form of incarceration.
Gary, they can't hear you.
Oh, okay. My mic is on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I need both of you guys to forget what race you are just for a second. Don't worry about being African American or whatever. The 13th Amendment of the United States says that incarceration shall exist in the form of slavery. That's what it says. So from day one, it was put in place. It was. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I can't hear either one of the other folks.
No, their mics are muted, Wayne. Can you hear me? Hello?
I can hear you. I don't think Wayne can.
The 13th Amendment was created for a reason. And slavery will exist in the form of incarceration.
You might need to come back in and out.
Yeah, I hear you, sweetheart, but I don't hear this. I don't hear the stud general.
Okay, hold on a second, y'all. I don't know what's going on. Let me just say this here, and we'll catch it up. The 13th Amendment says that slavery will exist in the form of incarceration. So incarceration is a big money business. It's a big money business.
I'm gonna call him on my phone and see if I can get it there.
When it comes to fixing a problem for the African American community, we always seem to have to do multiple studies, or it's going to take this long, or give us 1 year. Let's try this. Let's try that. Now, when we were out there selling crack was a problem, and they found every reason to lock us up. Now we flip it 30 years.
I'm going to drop back and call back.
We deal with the opiate situation. They treat it totally different. Justice reform should have been done a long time ago. But because you need those inmates in those beds, in the county, in the prison systems, is the reason that you're dragging your feet. You're coming up with the excuses as to why this cannot be done. That's all it boils down to. The bail bondsmen know if we get compassionate releases and bail reform, a lot of them are going to go out of business. Mm-hmm. So it's good if we can create the fear factor. It's good if we can create it. But until that man or woman becomes a convict, he's considered an inmate. He has not been, you've not convicted him of anything. As Aaron said, violence is a hard word. So what if I touch a cop on his shoulder and he locks me up for assault on a police officer?
There you go.
Okay, I can't get out of jail. Mm-hmm. What if two kids have a fight in school? Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? And this goes wrong. People have to clearly understand one thing. And no matter if you're black, you're white, Italian, whatever, when it comes to the African American community, the prison system was designed for us. And now it makes billions of dollars, and now you're dragging your feet as to the reasons why we have to continue to stay in these jails unjustly. When you can sit here and tell me that you can support a president that put an ad in a paper for 4 African Americans and a Latino brother in New York and agreed that they were violent offenders that raped somebody, and then 15, 20 years later, you come back and have to apologize for it? I'm rocking with justice reform, man.
Come on. I heard Wayne said, man, he doesn't go back to the Jim Crow era. You have to. You have to. If you truly want to understand this issue of justice reform, you have to. You have to understand what the black codes were and what the vagrancy laws were, right? A black man spit on the side of the road and they can put him in prison, right? And then you had the convict leasing law, so that black man that spit on the side of the road that you now have in prison, you can lease him right back to the fields that they just came from right after the emancipation, right?
Yeah.
And right, and you don't see nothing too different right now, to be honest.
Oh, you know what? Can I tell you something? This is where I get sort of frustrated, okay? Right. Because I'll be honest with you. Look, I think, I'm not the spokesman for white people, okay? So I wasn't here, right? So let me just suggest to you that I began this by telling you I fundamentally agree, but can't possibly understand, but fundamentally agree that the system and everything from the beginning of the country and slavery and all that is horrible and rotten, okay? But so I can't go back and change history. Where I always say is, okay, I can't fix 1960, okay? I was 4 years old, okay? But what I can do, and what I would ask everyone to do, black and white, is to sort of accept some realities, right? Is that poor people get screwed in the criminal justice system. Excuse me. Not just black people. Poor people do too, right?
Absolutely.
We have a system that we pay some guy a couple $100 to say, represent this guy, and he says, plead out the case, right? And lots of people plead guilty for stuff because they're afraid of going to jail for a long time. I've got cases that I've investigated in Polk County where a black guy was sent to jail by a prison by an all-white jury, okay? Maybe that's a problem, right? It sure looks bad, and it sure could affect justice. I'm not stupid, and I think a lot of people get it, right? So the question is, we can spend our time trying to discuss what happened, or we can say, this is what we're going to do to change it and fix it. And that's all we can do, guys.
But changing and fixing, Wayne, you have to understand why it is the way it is today, right? Like, so somebody like you normally, you jumped on there and said, well, you didn't own any slaves. Normally, when I hear that from a white person, I eject that conversation. Well, you came close to saying it. You came close. All right. Okay, you did. Okay, you didn't say it. You didn't say it. You got close though. But you basically saying,
no.
I mean,
Hold on.
But Wayne, you saying that we don't have to, don't take it back to Jim Crow. Don't worry about those. Guess what, man? I was brought up doing Jim Crow. I walked through colored and white lines.
I get it.
With my mama.
No, I'm not telling you it didn't happen.
Texas and to get in meat market with a little white banister separating us. We walking on the red dirt up there. They walking on pretty white tile. My mama sitting up talking to these people across the boundary. I'm like, how come we can't walk on the white tile?
Yeah.
We have to understand where we have come from. And this system, when you understand where we have come from in the criminal justice system since Jim Crow, you understand there's one very important thing, that this system is not broken. It is operating as intentionally designed. That's why we must go back there, Wayne. That's why we must go back there. Now, in order for all of this to change the way you want to, man, now you're talking about a moral revolution in America, really. And we know that shit ain't gonna happen. Martin Luther King said this in response to that. We cannot stop them from not loving us, but we can stop them from lynching us, which was a direct reference to policy and legislation, because we can't change nobody's heart, right? But we can change this legislation, and that's what justice reformers do, and that's what I work for every day, bro.
Yeah, look, I respect you, and I get it, right? I'm not defending, and look, and I have to sort of say one thing, okay? I think the idea that anybody ever had anybody as a slave is the most disgusting thing ever, right? My ancestors are Jewish, right? Jewish people were held slaves in Egypt for thousands of years. I'm not defending the history of of screwed up people thinking they're better than other people. I treat people like treat me.
I didn't think you were.
Okay, but no, but it's important to say that, because what I hear you say is today that we are this. Look, the system is screwed up, but I don't accept your argument that we are lynching people today because of the color of their skin. We are lynching. We are punishing people unfairly today. I think much more because of economic reasons, not racial reasons. Because I can show you the statistics. I think you know what I'm going to say. Is if you're poor and you get busted, it don't really matter. You're going to get a crappy lawyer if you get one at all, because there's not many public defenders offices that are worth their salt, right? And the system, there are cops that screw up. There are prosecutors who lie. Look, I've been investigating stuff for 30, 40 years. I cut my teeth as a reporter investigating the Joe Campos Torres case and the Randall Webster case and the police throwdown cases of the 70s, right? I get it more than you probably know. And I think it has a lot more to do with individuals and the views of criminal justice than race anymore. That's all I'm saying.
What?
In a lot of places.
No, you didn't just say that.
I do, because that's what I think. I'm sorry.
Okay, you're wrong.
Okay, well, I could be wrong.
I respect your opinion. You're wrong as hell, bro.
No, but no, look,
that's because you didn't walk down this aisle with me. You know what, man? I walked into a auto parts store today. I had on a black mask. I frequent that auto parts store. Them people know me in there. But when I came on it with that mask on, I mean, the feeling that I got was just eerie, bro. The way that they treated me was just eerie until they knew I wasn't a black guy coming in there to rob their store. I make that point because perception is real. Perception is real. And the color of our skin has been vilified for the past 400 years. Right? And it didn't stop at the doors of the courthouse.
I'm not saying
with the judge. It didn't stop with none of those. So you cannot discount that racism is the underlying issue.
Can I tell you,
need to reform this system?
Can I tell you real quick? In the 70s, when I became a reporter, on the police radios in the city of Houston, and I'm going to say something that's going to offend some people, so just hear me out for a second, okay? There used to be criminal incidents, right? Someone gets shot. And on the police radio, this is 1978, right? When I was first a reporter, where they said, this is a typical TNM, okay? There's a TNM. And I think all of us know what that means, right? Now, so I get cases, and people come to me all the time when I was a reporter, of cases where I firmly believe that, some guy was pulled over at 2 a.m. because he was a black guy driving a nice car at 2 a.m. Ron Wilson, who's a dear friend of mine, we used to play in a band together, the state representative. We went to an event once, and he was pulled over by a cop. He was driving one of his fancy cars, and he said to me, "It's driving while black." Okay, I am not here to tell you it does not exist. What I'm trying to communicate is that I think today it is far more about something else, and I will tell you something else. If you look at violent crime in this city, right? It is slanted, unfortunately, in the minority community. right? It is. That's a fact. That's not to say there aren't white criminals and white thugs and white idiots and white murderers and everything else.
Oh, what's the root problem of that? What's the root of that? When you have
Come on.
a failing school system that only gives them a diploma but a subpar education,
totally agree.
when they hit the streets as a graduate, they still got to eat.
I get. Look,
That's the root problem right there. But
yeah,
most of the failing schools are in the black and brown communities.
Why is that?
Why is that?
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you exactly why. Because we allowed ourselves to be bamboozled after Brown versus the Board of Education with magnet schools and school choice. And they're using it to their advantage, and they put all the resources into the affluent schools and forget that the black kids and the Latino kids on our side of town need the same education. So if you don't want to educate them and prepare them for the world, then they will have to get their education in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
So can I look? I don't want to interrupt, dominate the conversation. But can I tell you a quick story? Back when I was a reporter at Channel 13, I did an investigation of an after-school program at Dogan Elementary, and I got into an investigation of the PTA. Right, I think it was in the 5th Ward. Right, and they were spending money on video games, some real violent movies, some even sort of soft porn movies. And when I was investigating to find out why, they told me, and look, I'm not trying to defend this. I'm just telling you what truly happened, okay? That they said that they couldn't get anyone to attend the PTA meetings at the schools, okay, in the evening. My kids went to school in Katy. I moved out to Katy because I was getting death threats all the time, right? So I moved out far away, right? But I raised my kids in Katy. You know what the attendance at those PTA meetings are? 97%, okay? Every single parent. And I know there are people that work 2 jobs and stuff, but part of this, okay, and I'm not defending it, because when I used to do stories on North Forest ISD, they had more money coming in that place. They had more money coming in that place. It wasn't about the money. It was about what happened to the money when it got there. Okay, so we cannot deny that the problem is twofold, right? That for years, kids in minority schools were systematically undereducated, and 2, there's a lot of crap that happens that people don't take responsibility for in those communities because the politicians are worried about getting rich, right? Because parents don't take responsibilities of being parents. And I'm not making it a racial thing. It's just a life thing.
You just did.
No, it's called
life.
You
did. Yes, you goddamn did. You just said that if black mamas and daddies raised their children better, they wouldn't be in the fucking prison. That's what you just said, Wayne. And I take offense to that because your ass ain't walk where I walk. Let me tell you something, man. Back in the day, I was a drug addict, right? Back in the day, I was a drug addict, back on the streets of Austin.
Yeah.
I remember specifically, if I got caught with 1 crack of cocaine, guess what, man? I'm facing a mandatory minimum of 20 years.
Okay, we're arguing different
and the white boy right next to me is facing a very light sentence.
No, look, I am not making.
I mean, you're trying, so that you know, to go all the way back. Come on, man! I'm finna take you all the way back to 40 acres and a mule, right? When we got our ass threw out there and had a goddamn thing. What people don't understand, man, was that if we would have got them 40 acres and a mule, you know what that would have amounted to? 400,000 acres of accumulation of economic wealth for our people. That's what it would have amounted to. But we didn't get that. We had to scrape and goddamn claw, and y'all act like it was a million years ago. It was just the other day. Hell, when I was in high school, I was getting books that already had 50 signatures in them. And the white school down the street getting brand new books. You act like this shit was a million years ago. There were manifestations of what happened to us. And it ain't just because the mamas and the daddies of black kids are worse, Wayne.
I didn't. Wait a second. Look.
You said that?
No, I didn't say that. You didn't hear me. What I said is, Jerry talked about the schools and education. And I am sharing with you realities of what I have seen as a reporter. And That's not like, I mean, look, I think older black women are some of the coolest people I've met in my years. No, I do. No, it's because you are taking, that's the problem here. You are taking the part of this problem that is societal, maybe justifiably in certain minority communities, and saying, I am just saying, well, that's the only reason. White folks are smarter or better or richer. I'm not saying that at all. I don't think that for a minute. I think what happened to the African American community is screwed up, right? And when I say I wasn't here, right? So I can't. So you can argue about 1960 with me all day long and tell me horror stories, but it doesn't change.
It's not arguing about 1960. It's arguing about the ramifications of 1960 and 1865 and 1892 and what happened along the way.
I understand it, but what I'm telling you is, what is your solution? You talk about 40 acres and a mule just now, okay? Right? So what is your solution to that? Because we're not talking about criminal justice reform now. I think you're talking about.
Oh, you absolutely are still. You absolutely are. And see, one thing, when that seed of racism was planted in our criminal justice system way back there in Jim Crow, that thing, it started out a little seed, man, but it grew into a tree. And the branches have branched off into our educational system, into our socioeconomic system, into our healthcare system, into jobs. It's reached all of those places. That's why I'm telling you, you can't just forego and say, we'll forget what happened back in. Let's start fixing shit today. Man, it's a reason why things are the way that they are. You asked the question, how do we fix it?
I didn't say forget it. I didn't say forget it. I said we can't change it. We can only, look, you can't change the past. Look, I had an accident 3 years ago. I'd like to go back and change.
But you also can't know where you're going unless you know where you've been, Wayne.
You know what? That's partially true. And I'm not arguing that it doesn't affect what we need to do to fix things. What I'm telling you is that for the purposes of fixing it now, everyone knows, everyone gets it. It's the solution to it that matters. Look, what do you want people to do? Let's assume for the moment that I'm in this, like, I'm the white guy here, okay? But let's assume for the moment, right, that I'm the spokesman for the white people, right? Even though I'm olive skin, I don't even like the terms black and white because we're all shades of tan, whatever. Okay, but I'll be the white guy for a second.
No, I'm black, bro.
Well, right, and you're a good-looking man. What would you want us to do now to say, okay, let's assume my ancestors came from Italy in 1921, okay? So what would you want me, as someone whose family came from Europe in the 20s, to do about something that happened in the Civil War? I'm serious.
I want you to understand.
We do.
The black codes during the Jim Crow era.
We do.
That all of those families that they tore apart for a black man spitting on the side of the road resulted in what you're seeing in some of these ghettos right now. They knew what would happen if they didn't have a daddy in the family. I mean, this stuff was by intentional and by design and continues to this day. And so you say what to do about it. That's why I fight for justice reform. That's why I fight to rehabilitate. That's why I fight to end the collateral consequences. That's why I fight to legalize marijuana so it's not a gateway into drug into prison.
I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
Can we say this? And I'll say this here for the people that's out there.
This has been fun.
When you ask what we can do.
Yeah.
Now I hope I don't blow my internship, because I'm gonna ask a tough question for both of you guys.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think you should treat it justice reform just as well as you treated reparations for the Jews. In order to get those reparations for the Jews, for the Holocaust, you had to go back and you had to keep revisiting it. So what we're asking for is justice reform, but in order for us to get it, we have to go back and revisit our past. Y'all tell me.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with the premise. Okay, all I'm arguing is that I want a justice system that treats people fairly. But part of the problem is if you're poor, right, and then you're busted for a crime, okay, what would we have us do? Would you have us give you $50,000 to hire a high-priced lawyer for every single person who gets arrested? Because that's
no. I want you to change the laws to make it fair, just, and equitable. That's what I want.
But how do you change? What law do you change that makes that more fair and equitable? We both commit a robbery.
Okay, you asked me the question. I'll tell you. The Alliance for a New Justice System has 5 priorities that we're working on in 87 legislative session.
Okay.
Number 1, legalization of marijuana.
I'm with you.
Right? Because once you end that gateway drug in the prisons, you start to end mass incarceration. Number 2 is reentry and rehabilitation, right? Where we reacclimate inmates back out into society, to the workforce where they're now tax-paying citizens, right?
I agree.
Ending collateral consequences, where once they have been rehabilitated, right, that they now have an opportunity to get a job and to find somewhere to stay and to raise a family, right? Okay. Number 4 is bail reform. That's what we're talking about right now.
That's where we have to.
Number 5 is cite and release, which is really was a Sandra Bland bill, right? Ending this discretion that police officers have on investigatory stops, which is another gateway into prison for a lot of our people. Sandra Bland did because she didn't use a turn signal. I can tell you a story what happened right up here to my son. I got a phone call, Mr. Williams, you need to get to the end of the corner. What happened? They got your son on the ground. I get up there. He was a senior in high school, had a full scholarship to Prairie View. He was with my nephew who had a full scholarship to the University of Texas. You know where they were going? Fishing.
So when
Fishing. All they had in the car was a cooler and some doggone poles. I get up there, my son handcuffed on the goddamn ground.
Yeah. So when I
asked the officer, what happened, Mr. Officer? He said there was a report of a robbery down the road. They said a car ran through the fence. It's barbed wire fence down here. If my son's car ran through the fence, there'd have been some scratches on it. It was a brand new car, not nary scratch on it. He got stopped driving while black. And this car was about to fuck up their whole career, right? Because my nephew is driving my son's car with a permit instead of a license. I had to do something I said I'd never do.
I don't know if you're. I don't know if
I begged. And so I'm telling you, you act like this shit don't happen. It don't happen to you because you white.
No, you know what? We've been talking for an hour about this, and you still have not heard me. When I was a young reporter, there was a guy named Loyal Garner. You may have heard the case. I was the one that broke it. Him and 2 other guys were from Louisiana, came into Hemphill, Texas, and they got busted by the cops. And he wanted to call his wife. He had 7 kids. Wanted to call his wife, and they beat the crap out of him and killed him. The sheriff and 2 deputies. Look up the case, Loyal Garner, and look up the reporter that went to East Texas when his wife called me to investigate it. And they went to trial and they got off, but then they were convicted for civil rights violations for murdering a guy just because he wants to use the phone. I am not here to tell you that all over this country, still today, in lots of places, that there are black folk who are treated like they're criminals when they get stopped. And if you've gotten that from me, you're wrong. What I'm telling you is that we've got to meet somewhere in the middle, that there's got to be an acknowledgement that there are things that community can do to improve its own position. That's all I'm saying. And I don't think that's weird. I think that's right. And it doesn't matter whether I get pulled over. Look, I get pulled over by cops because I'm Wayne Dolecifino. I've been jacked up more over the years by cops not because I'm white, because I'm Wayne Dolecifino, right? And I investigated cops a lot in the old days.
Your kids ever got pulled over?
I'm sorry?
Your kids ever got pulled over?
Yes. They get pulled over
and went to jail? Went to jail because somebody was driving with a driver's permit?
No, but I'm not here.
Come on, Wayne. I'm trying to tell you now. I mean, just you can't
look,
it's like you're talking out of 2 sides of your mouth. It's like you want to understand and you're saying that this is the way that we should go. But bro, you talking at me from a perspective of non-understanding.
That's not
And
true.
I didn't mean to get on this show and get get angry. I did not. But when I hear people like you talk the way that you are, you want to be an advocate for the poor. You want to be an advocate for black people. And then you get on here and in the first 2 minutes you were on, mention the word violent criminal 50,000 times.
I wasn't talking about black people. I was talking about bail reform. You were talking about black people.
You were still convoluting. That affects us. You were still convoluting a message.
I don't
That's
care
what
what
I'm saying. You're talking out two sides of your mouth. I can't deal with people like you.
Well, I'm really sorry you feel that way because I'm having actually an entertaining time. But
actually, I am too.
Okay,
but I get tired of this shit after a while.
Yeah,
I
but
mean, you ain't walked into the auto parts store today like I did.
All right,
you ain't went through the situation.
Yeah, but
this shit weighs heavy on your ass after a while, Wayne. No, it's entertaining to you. It's real fucking life to me. How about that?
Come on, let's not be silly here. You know what I was saying. What I'm telling you is that when I talk about violent crime, and hear me, I want you to read my lips. I don't give a crap what color violent criminals are. I'm just as scared as violent white criminals as I am as black criminals. Okay? So when I talk about violent crime, you make it about race. I don't. Jim Crow or 40 acres or whatever the past doesn't give someone the right to rob and burglarize and kick people's doors down and beat them up.
We talk about the 70% that don't fit the description that you're talking.
That's what I'm trying to tell you.
You're talking about the 70% that don't fit that. That's what I'm saying. You keep talking about, you keep convoluting the message. You sound just like Kim Ogg and Acevedo.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm a big fan of Kim Ogg.
I mean, this makes all the sense in the world. Don't nobody want a violent criminal released.
Well, then stop it.
So why you got to keep talking about it?
Because it's happening.
About fixing the system.
Let's
talk about fixing the system, which you say is probably needed.
So then let's do it. Let's agree that you're going to call on all the Democratic judges.
I got a deal for you. I would like for you to become a partner with us in the Alliance for a New Justice System.
Come on, I'll do it. I'm serious. I'll do it. Look,
Jerry, hook us up, man.
Jerry,
hook us up.
Jerry,
I'm here.
Look, when people say they want dialogues, they've got to be able to hear the things that people agree with you on, and also say there are things the community can do, because criminal justice isn't the only reason that the percentage of homes of single African American females exists today, right? All I'm telling you is that people, I
got a lot to do with it, though.
Well, but it has something. Sure, this is a giant piece of it. But both of us have to agree that there are things that every community could do, right, to stay involved in their kids' lives, to make sure that they stay on them. Look, even as something as stupid as fire hydrants, I did a story on broken fire hydrants years ago, and if there were broken fire hydrants in my neighborhood for 10 years, I'd be up someone's butt so far they wouldn't know what happened, right? Yet there are communities that allow that to happen because they do not bitch, because they've gotten used to being treated that way. And what I'm telling you is that I like the fight back. I believe we have to fight to change things, but we also have to acknowledge shortcomings that contribute to perceptions, whether you like it or not. Because if you're not,
so I think that overall that you feel that compassionate release and bail reform are really necessary things that we need to do. You just don't like that violent people are getting released. You and I are on the same page on that.
Well,
let's work on that.
Yeah, but the problem is the current Democratic judges, and I'm being somewhat partisan here. The problem is the Republican judges were a little too, you know what, right? But we now have Democrat judges that sort of are trying to pay back the system by saying, you know what, I'll let you out. I don't care. And people are getting killed. And people in the minority community are especially getting hurt. And that's not the solution.
I can't say that about all those Democratic judges, because there's probably some conservative judges out there releasing violent criminals just so they can have something to convolute the message with. I mean, you paint everything with a very broad brush. I know a whole bunch of those judges that you're talking about, and they don't fit what you're saying.
Well, as a reminder, after the November elections, a white conservative judge in Harris County lost his election, and the very next day went into court and let everybody go home.
Yep. Because
violent, the whole nine.
Yeah, because Jerry, you know why that is? Because conservative judges believe to get reelected, they have to sometimes be hanging judges. Okay, I don't think that's right either. Okay,
No, not at all.
what I'm trying to argue is the middle. I think we'd be much more successful on bail reform and compassionate release if we would all, as a community, say we draw the line at the 70%. Let's work on the 70%, because then we could probably rehabilitate. The 30%, you're screwed. Sorry. That's what we could do. I'm with you.
Let's go to final words. Let's go to final words, Demetri. It's on you.
Hello.
Good at it, man.
I should have been drinking whiskey instead of this. I want to say this. You guys all said so much. Listen, I took so many notes of talking points I was going to say, and it's like, okay, well, I can't talk about that now. But I will say this. I think it's very telling that in 2020, we are still debating whether racism still exists. We know that it does. I mean, I just like everywhere you look. I mean, especially Black people, racism exists even when we don't even know it exists. You know, what is it? The money that was given out. A lot of minority businesses, the stimulus money for small businesses. A lot of minority businesses didn't even get it. Now we know what that's about. We know that's about racism. And so, you know, we're going to continue to talk about racism because Black people are still suffering the effects of racism from slavery.
Thank you, sir.
I mean, they call it post-traumatic slave disorder, in that all the things that, even though we weren't there in slavery, we still have been taught and passed down all those things. And just like Black people are still suffering, white people have also carried those learned behaviors on how to treat. I mean, I'm just speaking from a Black woman's point of view, how to treat Black people. And so we know systemic and institutional racism is still alive and well in 2020. So to me, I don't even want to like get into that, because to me it's silly. It's silly to say, well, no, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. Yes, it is. I'm a Black woman. I'm saying, yes, it does still exist. Now, for me, the whole bail reform thing is really a question of, are we talking about dangerous people, or are we talking about poor people? Because there's a lot of dangerous people that can make bail. So, right. And so we know there's a lot of poor people who maybe aren't as dangerous and they can't make bail. And I mentioned Khalid Browder. That's the most like prime example we can think of in modern day. A little boy, 16 years old, sat in Rikers Island for being accused. He never even went to court. It wasn't even formally charged. He was accused. He was spotted on the street by a man that said, he robbed me. His family couldn't make $10,000 bail, and that boy sat in prison for 3 years and eventually killed himself. So we know his story is not unusual. It happens to a lot of people who are poor. So to me, that's the question: is it dangerous people or poor people? Period. And so we know bail reform needs to happen, and we also know that prisons are privatized. They need to have, 80% or 90%, I think, occupancy rate. How do you do that? You have to guarantee those beds are filled to the investors. And so you lock up everybody. And we know Black people are just poorer rather. We're poor. We're the poorest people probably in the world. And so it's going to be predominantly us, because for one, we can't afford to get out, and racism exists. And somebody talks about lynching. A lot of times we think of lynching as somebody getting a rope around their neck. Lynching is all kind of forms of unjust murder, if you will, right? Walter Scott in North Carolina, he was running from a cop. Should he have been running from the cop? No, but he was shot in his back. Now, how many times have we seen white people do this? I mean, they're running in toward the officer, antagonizing the officer, and the officer don't even fire a taser dart toward him. So we know that lynching is still alive and well. Hell, in Texas, was it I can't remember his first name, but Bird. He was drugged down the street.
James Bird.
Yeah.
That's lynching. So that stuff still exists. To me, it's just that we're even arguing about that. I mean, I don't even understand why we're doing it.
Donovan, final words.
Final words. Well, first of all, I want to thank the guests for coming on the show. Great debate. It's good to have a good conversation, no matter what side of the coin you're on. It is still the same coin. But, I really feel that we really got to hold our elected officials to the fire. Former California DA or State Attorney General Kamala Harris, that man is still in jail today, and he did not do a crime. And we know the the prison industrial complex. They got to make money. That's what it's about. Look at their investments. That's what this is all about. It's all about the money. So cut the check is what I need to say. If you give me my reparations check, I could go find my own heaven. I don't know by the numbers how much crime will go down, but I do know it will go down in the Black community if they had opportunities where they don't have to steal, they don't have to survive, whatever you want to call it. So cut the check. But great debate tonight. I really appreciate both of you guys coming on the show. It was awesome.
I'll close it out with this. One, this is a discussion between two men that I respect a lot. And it's a discussion that has to be had throughout America.
Yep.
It has to be had. So yeah, it's gonna get a little heated. You're not gonna like the viewpoints of Robert. You're not gonna like some of the viewpoints of Wayne. But that is how you end up getting to the table to have the discussion to get it solved. So for those that don't understand that, we get it. But as usual, man, I appreciate you guys and your viewpoints. I get to talk to these guys a lot. So it's always great to see two different minds sit down and have the discussion that needs to happen. And this is the discussion that has to happen with our political leaders, our governors, as well as those people in Washington. This is the one that you need to bring to the Senate and sit down and have a Senate hearing about it. Because you got to hear it. You see, Khalif is no longer here. He can't speak for himself anymore. So it's going to take a Demetra K or a Robert Williams or Wayne Dolecifino. Now, I will say this here, and I'm going to close this out. I want justice reform, but I got a problem with somebody who commits a crime that's on 4 or 5 bails. I don't understand that.
Yep.
And I know in California, you're going to get 1 bail. You violate the terms of that bail, you go into jail with no bail. That's what it is. But to allow somebody to, and this is where I'm saying, maybe you could get 5. But when you got 4 that's already violent, I don't see you getting a 5th bail.
Nope.
So yeah, we got some things we got to work out in that. But I think if we can have this discussion on a national level, then so be it. Yeah. And I'm gonna tell you guys something. No matter what you're doing tomorrow night, I'm gonna have the originator of the Scared Straight program, my brother Reginald Gordon, on this show tomorrow. And we're gonna tell you, because we work together every day. I'm gonna backdoor it 2 days in a row. Watch this. Reginald Gordon tomorrow night, and we're gonna flush it out Saturday night with Dr. Abdul Halim Muhammad. For those that don't know, Dr. Robert Muhammad. We're gonna tell you what the root problem is. We can tell you how to keep the kids out of the jail system. But we gotta have this discussion. But in order for us to get bail reform and get everything moving, we need to fix our educational component. That is the major problem. When they don't have an education, and I'm going to leave y'all with this here. He may not have an education, but he still got to eat. And he's going to eat by any means necessary.
I get it.
I promise you that. So thank you guys for coming on. I want to thank my guests, Wayne Dolecifino, my man Robert Williams.
Thanks, Robert.
My co-host, Donovan Sadiq.
Stay in touch, Wayne.
Beautiful Demetra K.
You too.
And I am the 5-star general tomorrow night. Reginald Gordon, OG1. He invented Scared Straight, and HBO stole it from him. But I get to work with him every day. I'll holler at y'all, man.
That was fun, guys. Good talking to you.